I will now call Elena, Gaetano, and Mauro for the presentation of the next case study, which is actually going to be shaped slightly differently because we're going to talk about the Mediterranean and we will run a sort of mini panel. So while they are joining, I will quickly introduce them. Elena you've seen her on Monday. She's senior researcher at the National Research Council Institute of Marine Sciences in Italy, and she's also working with the Stanford University. She has over a decade of research experience in producing and integrating ecological knowledge in decision-making processes. And Elena has also very broadly published. You will find references in the guide that I keep referring to. Gaetano Leone is coordinator at the United Nations Mediterranean Action Plan Barcelona Convention Secretariat. He's based in Athens, and he has a very strong and diverse experience of political and inter-organizational affairs, intergovernmental processes, leadership and management, partnerships. Quite an impressive CV, I have to say, Gaetano. You were Deputy Secretary of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I think it's an also important point to highlight. Again, all the details about Gaetano are in this document that I don't know if everybody can see because it's not easy, that I really strongly recommend everyone to check. Mauro, our third presenter in this panel, Mauro Rondone, is regional manager at WWF Mediterranean, where he coordinates the Sustainable Blue Economy program. Mauro is a marine biologist and sociologist with a long-term experience in international cooperation and natural resource management. And Mauro is the main author of the report, Reviving the Economy of the Mediterranean Sea, Actions for a Sustainable Future. The report is dating back to 2017, and I strongly recommend that you go and check it. Maybe we can put a link in the chat. This report basically assessed the overall economic contribution of a healthy Mediterranean to the GDP of the region. So thanks again, and 1,000 million apologies for the delay, but I think the conversation that is ongoing is so interesting that it's hard to stop it. So thanks for your patience. It's actually quite interesting to have you because each of you is representing, either a decision maker, the civil society, science, and I guess you've already been in your experience around the table with colleagues or people from the different backgrounds. So my first question to you would be, what is your experience of being together around the table? Elena, you want to take the floor first?
I would leave the floor to the decision maker first.
Thank you, and I'm not sure about being decision maker more than policy maker here in this region as Barcelona Convention. I mean, just there have been several references to UNEP, to the Barcelona Convention. What I want to emphasize in this minute to respond to your question, Chantal, is the fact that we are a UN regional treaty with three clear dimensions, which is institutional, so the governments, etc., the partners, of course, which is regulatory, legal, with all the legally binding instruments, and which is about action and implementation. So in all these dimensions, the role of collaboration, of partnership is absolutely crucial. What makes us unique is the legally binding nature of our strength. As I said already this morning, there is a need for enforcement, and also here, the relationship with civil society, the relationship with science are essential ingredients. But there is also a strategic option which is crucial, and for us, that is dialogue. We are too small an actor, and the challenges and the complexity of the Mediterranean are too big for any one of us to go ahead by themselves. So I just want to give one quick example. before closing, and it's the relationship, for instance, with GFCM, since there has been discussion on fisheries. We have involved them directly into helping us with the ecosystem-based management, with the definition of indicators and targets, for instance, on integrated monitoring and assessment across the region and at the county level, but also with GFCM, with IUCN, with ACOBAM's colleagues who are here, what we do together in area-based management, for instance, tools, development, identification of for marine protected areas. So there would be a lot to say. One last tiny point I want to make. We learn a lot from other regional seas. So on marine litter, we've had strong collaboration, for instance, with HELCOM, OSPAR, and the Black Sea in looking at ways around the European continent to have a consolidated and experience learning process. I stop here. I'll be happy to give additional details. I don't want to take too much time from the other colleagues.
Thanks, Gaetano. Mauro, Elena?
Elena, go for it.
Okay, thanks, Chantal. So being at the table as a scientist is very challenging and very interesting. It is challenging from one side because we have to move from our comfort zone, in the sense that we know and we are trained and we are assessed because of the science that we produce. And in a way, we try to occupy our niche in research to create our profile as a scientist. But on the other hand, and being at the table with the policymakers and with the NGOs is a challenge, because we need to shift from our way of thinking many times, and a lot of times is a matter of also of a personal attitude in doing that. Because, for instance, we can, like, I know colleagues that are just happy when they are in their lab doing their samples or experiments, or when they are on field, and so they are much less, let's say, comfortable when we have to deal with negotiating. Also because the rules of the science policy dialogue is not something we are trained on. So this course or the other courses are very important. And sometimes it's very important to understand the rules, the unwritten rules also in this kind of interactions, which are not necessarily very transparent. And so we need really to train ourselves in tailoring how we can leverage knowledge into these kind of processes, and how to find the good words, the good personal attitude. For instance, like I'm trained as an engineer, so when I have to talk to infrastructure ministry, I present myself as an engineer, so that they are relaxed that I'm not, let's say, a conservationist, though I work for conservation actually to improve conservation into that. And these are just an expedient that I use when I talk to people, and I don't think I compromise myself. It's just a matter of achieving a goal and to find a good way to communicate with people.
And adapt to your audience, I guess.
Yes, and overcome stereotypes is in this kind of discussions is also very like trying really to listen, to understand what's going on and what is the, like, it's really like a standing experience each time that you sit on a table to see who is in front of you.
Yeah.
So, and what is the key leveraging points for the discussion, because like layman wording is important, while we are completely fully trained in being as much as obscure as possible to put the other people in a sort of wow, she's talking difficult things, so probably she knows what she's talking about, but this is something that is not possible to do when you sit on on a table with decision makers and NGOs. So it's really a matter of understanding, trying. And so I talk differently if I sit with my own ministry, or when I was invited to a seminar with the Northern African countries. So it's very different. So even if you are in front of some male, females, women, men, it's really
especially in the Mediterranean, I guess. I see Mauro nodding a lot. Mauro is actually a former colleague of mine, and I'm a communicator. So I just would like to add that it's also important wherever you are to work with the communications people, because conveying science, conveying policy messages is not always an easy thing. And the wording and the fact that you consider, as you were saying, Elena, the person in front of you, and as Katarina was also saying on Monday, as a human being, first of all, is something that can help a lot. So Mauro, you surely have a point of view on all this. I also would like to add a question on top, which is, have you seen things evolve over time?
Thanks, Chantal. And I think it's one of the key memories of our collaboration was when you told me to explain sustainable blue economy to my grandmother as a way of communicating effectively, and that really stuck in my head. Anyway, what have we learned from our experience in MED? I think it's when I was thinking about what to say today, one thing came up, which was collaboration. So open cross-border collaboration as a key element. And it's funny because today basically everyone mentioned it. So I think we have a recurring theme here. We know that that collaboration is also extremely complex, and this is particularly evident in the MED. So without generalizing, I think that we're not used to collaborate. We're not trained to collaborate. We're trained to be heroes that save the day and protect our data, defend ourselves, our donors, etc. So it's a big problem. It's not so easy to just say let's collaborate more. There's a need for a sort of cultural shift, I think. And if we want to solve these complex problems, like, I mean, that's what we have to do. We have to move in that direction. I think it's evident from what we do. Like, I mean, the role of WWF, the primary role is probably the one of being the link with the stakeholders. In the Mediterranean, we have, for instance, 28 pilots of fisheries co-management and hundreds around the world. So we try to facilitate the engagement of these communities in MSP processes. At the same time, we realize that basically our work is meaningless if we don't have solid science behind it, and then practically if we don't have the governance to make it happen. So, you know, we need to stop working in silos and sort of try to get more involved.
Is it improving? That's a question I would ask to all, and then we move to the next one.
It's improving very much. I think we have the right sort of enabling conditions in the Mediterranean. Things are changing, and you know, we are MAP partners, so we work with Gaetano. We are in regular contact with Elena. So within this panel, like, I mean, you can say that we talk to each other very often. I think there is still an issue, especially in the context of MSP. For instance, a stakeholder like WWF or you know, community-based organizations and the civil society is not seen as a key stakeholder in the process very often. It is in northern countries, it is in other parts of the world, not yet in the Mediterranean. Just to give you an example, I think in a month we have the MSP directive with the plans that need to be produced. And we've actually been directly involved in MSP plans, in 2 MSP plans in the whole of the Mediterranean region, the EU Med region. And we are WWF, we are the biggest, probably one of the biggest environmental NGO. Can you imagine, like, you know, how do you involve, how have you involved like fishing communities, and those communities that cannot participate, they don't have the means to participate in these processes. So we're getting there, but we're still far.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks a lot. To the trainees, I just would like to remind that for this case study too, we're going to use the voting system, and I'm going actually to ask now a question which is more connected to EBMSP in the Med that require this cross-disciplinary research and integrating planning. And I would like to ask each of you to give us an example of your work in that sense. And for example, Gaetano, how can we integrate climate change and planning processes?
Yeah. Thank you, Chantal. And again, I apologize if my voice was not coming through clearly. I did forget my headphones, so apologies for that. I hope you can hear me better on screen.
We hear you, eh? It's
okay,
not, yeah, we hear you.
There is one, I mean, the background, we all know it, is that the Mediterranean is one of the climate change global hotspots around the world. And we also know very well that coastal planning processes are, how can I call them, a natural entry point for the implementation of climate change adaptation strategies in the Mediterranean, like everywhere else. However, the problem that we have here, although there has been some progress, is that the capacity and the coordination among governmental decision makers and stakeholders, including from the private sector in the Mediterranean region, is still lacking, is still insufficient. So the responses that we see to climate change related pressures and hazards are still limited to short-term, very reactive local emergency measures. And this is particularly negative if you think of the regional impact then, of the fact that climate change impacts don't know boundaries, and therefore a cross-border coordinated and collaborative approach is absolutely required. The one thing that we will be working on in the next period of our medium-term strategy is to push for early planning and implementation of adaptation measures in these areas. So I want to very briefly describe, as you invited me to do, Chantal, a case which, in my mind, has been relatively at least successful, and it's the case of Montenegro, where concrete steps have been taken towards the implementation of the ICZM protocol, including with focus on climate change. So the country ratified the ICZM already in 2011. The protocol, so immediately after it was agreed upon by the contracting parties. And Montenegro, within 4 years, with our support, developed a national ICZM strategy, and most importantly, also established, so this is the institutional aspect, also established a National Council for Sustainable Development, Climate Change, and ICZM. So already in the title, you see the links that are very clearly established between, among sustainable development, climate change, and ICZM. So what we helped, especially our colleagues in Paprac in Croatia, was to, the first step was really assessment. And I think it is crucial that updated data and information about the cost is a basis for proper planning activities. This was, how did we do then this? Through preparing assessment towards good environmental status, so on the basis of clear common indicators and targets, and using that information then to identify, together with the Montenegrin stakeholders, the most valuable and sensitive marine areas, as well as areas where there were the highest pressures on the marine environment. This was practically the basis for proposing how to allocate spatial and temporal marine uses in a way that they don't harm, or at least provide a minimum harming effect on the environment. This happened because, thanks also to the government authorities, all relevant stakeholders from the public and private sectors were involved in the discussion. Of course, we are talking of a very localized here area, which makes it obviously much easier than if we consider the entire national or even sub-regional and regional process. But there is a lot to be learned from here, because it is the cooperation between a regional organization such as ours, the Montenegrin governmental authorities and commitment, but also the buy-in into ecosystem-based management, into coordination, integration. All these values were shared. And it's interesting that what in developing now the coastal plan, which is our next step for the Kotor Bay area, the stakeholders have specifically requested to organize, to start with awareness raising campaigns on climate change and on adaptation opportunities for coastal areas. So there is in conclusion, there is a general need to implement activities that build the capacity and knowledge of policymakers and relevant actors, mainstream climate change adaptation into ICZM, which should be obvious, but it's not always. Assist mobilizing public and private finance, because this is a crucial success element, or in success, the fact that there is enough finance for adaptation, and strengthen engagement and partnership between stakeholders, which also means enhancing the knowledge with science on adaptation and climate information. So I want to stop here, but really focus on the fact that because we are talking of cooperation, we're talking of climate change responses, this is crucial. And to answer your previous question, to which Mauro answered, so do we see a step? Do we see any progress? I think we do. In a difficult region such as the Mediterranean, I think a lot of progress has been done in terms of involvement of stakeholders and cooperation among the various roles that we all have in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaetano. Maybe Mauro, you want to build on what Gaetano says and look at the, for example, the case of how do we make cooperate renewable offshore together with fishery? How do they coexist?
Well, that's an example of complexity. It's the topic of the moment as well. I think up to a few years ago in the Mediterranean, many scientists and many organizations were saying that there was no hope for wind farm development, and we saw in 3-4 years the technology completely changing, and now I think in Italy only we're dealing with 3-4 new huge plants being proposed, so huge farms offshore. So I think it's complex because we have at least three sort of priorities converging and conflicting potentially. So it's not only the need to deal with climate change, so to produce clean energy, but it's also dealing with the biodiversity crisis and essentially meeting the CBD objectives of 30% and the new EU biodiversity targets objectives of the 30% protection. And in there, we also have the fishers that depend on the fishing grounds for their livelihoods. And so there's the social component as well. And I'm not saying that I have the solution. Actually, I can openly say that there is a dialogue within WWF on this issue. I can talk openly. I think we only have 66 people here. Basically, we have people dealing with conservation. We have conservation teams that prioritize MPAs. We have other teams that work on wind farms, and they don't necessarily always agree with each other. So I personally think that they can coexist. Well, they need to coexist because all these problems are related. If we don't solve climate change, we're going to have an impact on biodiversity. So we need to make it work somehow. That's the key point. I think this case study of offshore wind farms, especially the floating ones, is particularly interesting And we recently developed a project in collaboration with actually CNR and Andrea, which is called Faros for MPAs. And we looked at the interactions between these, all the economic sectors of the blue economy and conservation. Ecosystem-based MSP is definitely a big part of the answer. Although I feel that it needs to be integrated in a broader framework of integrated ocean management. And I think somebody mentioned it before, sustainable blue economy planning. So everything needs to be seen together. You know, we need at the same time solid science that can feed the proper strategic environmental assessment. So essentially understand and engage with the stakeholders to try to understand how to make it work. And this cooperation needs to happen also within ministries and local authorities that need to identify solutions and talk to each other. I think this idea of the ministries for ecological transition, it's a very good move in that direction. So yeah, the answer basically is that we need to reach a compromise, and we'll have to reach a compromise. It may not make everyone happy, but we need to achieve the sustainability targets that we have in front of us. So the compromise is inevitable.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mauro. I think, Elena, we have, with what Mauro mentioned, lots of things also to see from the scientific standpoint. How can scientific research actually inform marine policies?
So when considering how to frame a bit this question, which is so broad, I preferred to present a case. So
no, exactly. The idea is to go through a case.
Yes. So for instance, in the Italian MSP process, we were asked as a scientific consultant to support the implementation of the analysis of environment, of the interactions between environment and uses, which is basically the scientific knowledge about cumulative effects. So really to measure and to trust and to manage potential negative effects from multiple uses. And so we were like, I was thinking about, okay, so how do we do it? Because in a way we have to think about what the framework in which we are trying to build this knowledge for. So this knowledge should be something that needs to be accepted by the policymakers in a way, but so we couldn't really put forward very complicated modeling efforts, also because time was very limited and also resources to do that. So, but in a way we wanted to push a bit the boundary to move forward a bit and to try to include concepts that are being now widely accepted. So in the analysis that we proposed and we performed, in a way we moved towards proposing innovation in how conservation is usually dealt with, but doing something that is acceptable also from the management point of view, because in a way we suffered a bit from the fact that sometimes the scientists, since they decide the research topics independently from the knowledge needs, sometimes from the decision-making perspective, we are perceived like you as scientists, you do whatever you want, but this is not something that we need. So it's very difficult for them to understand and to select the one research instead of the other, because in the scientific debate we contrast each other in a way of understanding and growing and replicating and testing scientific hypotheses. But this is not something that is really that is transferable as it is in a decision-making process. So in a way we had to discuss, and we are going on discussing with our ministries about what we produced and how we produced that, but really pushing and to find windows of opportunities, because in a way, and to build a path for new knowledge to be incorporated while doing that. In a way, also climate change is a broad topic and we are doing research on that. But then when you have to incorporate this knowledge, it's also a matter of, okay, so what is reliable at this time, so that can be something on which a policy can be can be built on. So it is, I think, I'm recalling the point of Mauro that said good, reliable science. So in a way, as a scientist, we need to push ourselves to be reliable, meaning keep publishing, because this is a way as scientists we keep our knowledge to be assessed through the proper tools, through the proper mechanisms, but on the other hand, also thinking how to relate this knowledge with decision-making processes, which have different mechanisms in a way. And I think this is a very big challenge for all of us. But again, considering where you start from and trying to push the boundaries of the knowledge that the input to open up for innovations, models, and also to try to make them to understand why you are pushing that further.
Yeah, I think it's a process that probably everyone has to make at different levels. A politician to be more open to science, a scientist to be more open to understand what is at stake for a decision maker, and you know, all these processes need to look at what's happening on the other side and put in the shoes of their interlocutors. I think this is something really key. We have a vote session for what you presented. So Martina. Basically, here we've heard different things. We've heard different cases and examples. So in the different examples you've heard about, there will be some key enablers that you can see. So it's again a multiple choice. You can choose as many as you want. Maybe I would say 3 in this case, because otherwise we might end up with everybody ticking every box, as we touched on many different aspects.
Well, if I may, just 2 words. I couldn't agree more. Obviously, the emphasis on the collaboration of stakeholders involvement, I emphasized it also in my presentation, but it's clear also from what Mauro and Elena said. So I think we all agree on this fundamental point, but there is still work to be done.
Okay, Mauro, Elena, any reactions?
Yeah, nothing to add. I think fully agree. Stakeholder engagement, it's often taken lightly, but it's the key element for effective ecosystem-based MSP. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Elena, any reaction or comment?
Trusting mechanisms as like transparent mechanisms of science policy is also very important, I would say. We see very good examples, as we said, also in GFCM, for instance, or in other, where these mechanisms are very transparent and clear. These are very effective in a way, where these are, and this is a very important enabling factor, I would say.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much to you 3. It was really interesting. Another very rich session for this morning. Gaetano, thanks a lot for being with us. I know you have to leave. Thanks, Mauro. Thanks, Elena. Really very interesting and useful inputs for all of us.